economics, but it's also an open lecture. It is in English because the course is in English, as some of you know. So today we'll first have an invited presentation. Feel free to attend this lecture. We're really happy to see people.
To attend, but not to attack.
Not to attack. Okay. And after that, we will have a couple of presentations, a seminar with students. They will actually present a couple of related papers related to the content of today. Okay, a few words about Danil Razeev. Danil is a philosopher from St. Petersburg. I had the privilege to cooperate with Danil in some seminars and some research proposals. So we discussed many times the possibility of an interaction between philosophers and neuroscientists and neuroeconomists. I think we are gradually moving in this direction. And Danil kindly agreed to give a talk about, I think, very, very interesting topic about the free will. To be honest, I think that neuroeconomics open very interesting questions about freedom and free will. It would be very interesting to know how modern philosophers look to this fight between philosophy and neuroscience. And Danil is one of the leading experts in philosophy of science. I had the privilege to attend some fantastic seminars in St. Petersburg about consciousness and neuroscience, about multidisciplinary aspect of consciousness. And today we will get a quite unusual talk from a philosopher. I'm looking forward to see and feel free to ask questions. I have final remarks. So we were asked to make a list of people who are interested in this kind of interdisciplinary topics. So if you are interested in this kind of lectures, please put your name and email here. I will circulate this paper around the room.
Hi, well, Vasily, thank you so much. The topic of my talk is free will, illusion, or reality. Let us start immediately because I have a lot of what to say to you. So, do we have free will, and why should we care? So this question has been one of the most fascinating and widely discussed topics in philosophy since the last several decades. The so-called problem of free will has been attracting the attention of researchers from many disciplines. So the purpose of my talk will be as follows. Firstly, to shed light on central philosophical approaches to the problem of free will. I'm going to talk about determinism, libertarianism, and compatibilism. Secondly, I'm going to consider free will experiments recently conducted by neuroscientists, and more particularly Benjamin Libet's experiments and John Dylan Haynes. And thirdly, I'm going to discuss whether these experiments may help us to understand the nature of free will. So before I start dealing with the concrete philosophical and scientific issues, I would like to point out that the notion of free will plays an enormous role in our everyday life and has its roots in our common sense knowledge. Let me demonstrate this point using a very simple example. So when I was preparing my talk, I was thinking about a jacket that I would be wearing during my talk today, and I had two options. So let me show them to you. I had two options. And I would like you to help me. So I would like you to make a small experiment today. So who wants me to wear the right jacket during my talk? So please raise your right hand. Oh, wait a moment, wait. Who wants me to wear the left jacket? Raise your left hand. So I count 1, 2, 3.
Left to us or to you?
Right or left? Right and left to
So
you.
blue
Yeah.
or gray?
Yeah. So I start counting. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm going to demonstrate the jacket that I have chosen for my talk. So I have chosen this one. This one. I very much like it. And so my point was, so when I was decided to do this experiment, that in a way I forced you to raise your hands. So what I did, I forced you to raise your hands. So now I want you to make a complete free decision. So I'm sure that at this moment you are able to raise or not raise your hands. Up to you. So please, I ask you to decide so whether or not to raise your hands. And those of you who have decided to raise your hands, to do it on count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. So it seems so obvious to us that if we want to raise our hands, we can do it. However, we could have done something different. So for example, we could have kept our hands down. And some of the audience did so. So intuitively, it seems to us so clear that when we consider, so that we could raise or not raise our hands. So, but these intuitions begins falling to pieces if we consider raising a hand as a physical event in physical reality. So, when we think about worlds outside ourselves, it seems that when things happen, there has to be a reason for it. So let me give you another example. So I have a very nice bonsai tree in my apartment in St. Petersburg. I very much like it, bonsai tree. Suppose one day I came home and saw that my bonsai tree, my beautiful bonsai tree, was dead. Oh, what would I think about this event? Would I think that probably it was a random event and there was no explanation for why it happened? No, I wouldn't think so. Rather, I would think that there had to be an explanation for what happened to my tree. So probably it didn't have enough water, or it didn't get enough sunlight, or someone poisoned it intentionally or accidentally, and so on. Speaking more generally, it seems that for any event, for anything that happens, there has to be a reason. There has to be an explanation for why it happened. And some of people in the history of philosophy and science realized that this general rule that we can call the principle of causality might and should apply not only to the physical processes, including the processes taking place in our bodies, but also to our mental processes, to our decisions and so-called free actions. This is the crucial point in the free will debates. We have two views, two intuitions that run up against each other in the problem of free will. On the one hand, it seems intuitively compelling that when I do something, I could have done something else. And on the other hand, it seems that we should be able to explain or to find a reason for anything that happens in physical reality. So the question is how to combine these two intuitions or these two views together. The intuition about our decisions, which seem to be free, and the intuition about actions, which seem to be determined by physical laws. Is it possible and if it is, then how exactly, to find a unified scientific explanation for both intuitions. So let me use again the example of raising a hand. How to combine, is it possible to combine together the intuition that raising my hand was the result of my free decision to do it, and the intuition that the very action of raising the hand was determined by physical laws of the universe. So this is the first core aspect of the problem of free will. The second aspect of the problem is linked to the notion of moral responsibility. The idea is that a person can only be morally responsible for an action if the action came from their free will. Therefore, a person deserves to be praised or blamed for an action only if they chose it freely. Philosophers, in their discussions on free will, have paid a great deal of attention to the notion of moral responsibility, and that is a point where they differ from many contemporary scientists interested in the question of free will. Now, let me give you an overview of three philosophical approaches to the free will problem: hard determinism, libertarianism, and compatibilism. The first of the general approaches to the free will problem is called determinism. There have been many versions of determinism in the history of philosophy. I'm going to present to you so-called hard determinism. It claims that everything that happens is a result of what happened before. And this is supposed to go back to the very beginning of the universe. What happened first? The result as well. So what happened stretches back to the beginning of the universe. So now you can ask me, so wait a moment. So if it were so, it would mean that I had to give my talk this afternoon. I had to give my talk this afternoon. I had to give my talk this afternoon, and you had to attend this talk this afternoon because of what happened before. And that happened before because of something that had happened before, previously, and so on, right back to the Big Bang. Therefore, I am giving my talk, and you are attending this talk because of the chain of events going back to the primordial soup of matter that existed on the split seconds after the Big Bang and the Big Bang itself. Moreover, if we had rolled back the universe from the present moment till the Big Bang, it would have exactly the same course up to this moment. And I would have sat here again, giving my talk to you, and all of you, without any exception, would have sat here as well. I hope you feel why this type of determinism is called hard determinism. Hard determinism is based on several scientific assumptions. So let me mention just two of them. Firstly, it claims that there is nothing outside the physical universe. And secondly, it claims that the physical universe is causally closed. In other words, physical events are caused solely by physical events. And physical events always follow the laws of physics. According to hard determinists, everything is made up of physical particles, including plants, living organisms, and people. And if we have a complete story of how physical particles have moved, then we have a complete story about the universe, including people. If hard determinism is true, it doesn't matter what I tell you next, because the universe follows its course depending on what happened at the Big Bang. And nothing can change the causal story of events predetermined by that what happened then. That is why hard determinism claims that we do not need any notion of free will. It simply doesn't fit into the predetermined course of events in our universe. Hard determinists are skeptics about the existence of free will. They maintain that it doesn't exist. Free will, it doesn't exist. So let me be more specific about how this is supposed to work. Hard determinists claim that if determinism is true, then we are not free. Their position is sometimes called free will eliminativism, because they say that the view that we have free will is an error and we should eliminate this idea. Hard determinists think that the idea of free will comes from the vocabulary of the so-called folk psychology. This means from our intuitive knowledge about how our mental life is organized. An example of a notion from the vocabulary of folk psychology is witchcraft. Witchcraft. Many people in the Middle Ages time thought that evil women performed magic using a supernatural mental power and caused diseases, illnesses, and even death. Nowadays, we all know that there is no such thing as witchcraft. Hard determinists want to say something similar about free will. It is a notion that has been used by people for a long time, but it is a deeply defective notion, just like the medieval notion of witchcraft and witches. Just as we concluded that from a scientific point of view, there is no such thing as witchcraft, we should conclude that there is no such thing as free will. Let me summarize. The thesis of hard determinism is as follows. If determinism is true, then free will is an illusion. As I said before, this thesis means the following. Firstly, everything in the universe is determined by natural laws. Secondly, mental activity is a part of nature along with everything else. Thirdly, we have to explain mental activity with natural laws and do not need to refer to a supernatural power such as free will. The second of the philosophical approaches to the free will problem is libertarianism. This approach has a very long tradition in the history of philosophy. Libertarianism is diametrically opposed to determinism. It claims that by recognizing we have free will, if we claim that we have free will, if we recognize it, we can prove that determinism is false. Philosophers who defend this position are called libertarians. In free will debate, libertarians embrace the idea that we have free will in a very robust sense. According to them, we do have free will, and it is simply obvious and evident to us. I'm going to introduce one of the libertarian theories called the agent causation theory that believes in the existence of a non-physical soul. And this soul is the source of our choices. Libertarians think that there has to be an I or an agent that causes my choices. The agent is unique and differs from all the rest of what exists in the universe. The agent is who causes the decisions and choices. Libertarians claim that humans gain a sense of free will at a very early stage of psychological development. Free will requires that the agent makes their decision without being determined. Some of the factors that influence our choices are not chosen by the person, of course. If you have a genetic propensity for something, you can be held responsible, you cannot be held responsible for this genetic propensity. You can only be held responsible for how you respond to this propensity. A person is not responsible for those factors that they didn't choose in a way. Genetic factors, childhood's environment, and so on. So the person cannot be blamed for having bad genes or growing up in a bad environment. The person can only be responsible for the part of the choice that includes all those external influences. The way we normally think about responsibility includes our willingness to exclude a lot, because we recognize that a lot of the factors in the decision are obviously outside of agent's control. The only thing that seems reasonable to hold me responsible for is how I react to the given factors, how I react to the external environment, to my genes, and so on and so on. So the agent causation theory, as I said earlier, this is one of the influential libertarian theories, presupposes three features. Firstly, an action is free if it applies to an internal mental act, decision or choice, not to external consequences. Secondly, an action comes from free will only if the person is the sole cause of the choice. Only if the person is the agent who chose. Thirdly, a person's action is a result of free will only if the person could have done otherwise. If I could have done otherwise, only in that case I can be held responsible for something. So let me give a summary of the notion of free will from a libertarian point of view. Firstly, the libertarian idea of free will is strongly connected to the notion of moral responsibility. The only thing that could count as a free act is an internal one, such as decision or choice, not resulting from external or outward consequences. You cannot be held responsible for external consequences, just for internal decisions. Secondly, it applies to only actions of which the agent is the sole cause. The act of decision is obviously constrained in many ways by things that we do not choose, genes, character traits, external environment, and so on. If we say that someone has made a free choice to act,